Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Ain Nadhirah. Now I would like to explain a little bit about the introductions or the definitions of the adoption, the history of the adoption, and some kind of NGO for adoption in Malaysia. The first one is the definition or the introductions of the adoption. So what is adoption? Okay, so basically, Cambridge Dictionary defines adoption as the act of legally taking a child to be taken of as your own. So meaning of that, the adopter taking a child or taking some children to be their own child and to be treated as their own child. Okay, so the legal adoptions permanently transfer all rights and responsibilities along with filiation from the biological parent or parents. So meaning that the adopter have the rights, okay, to on the children, have the right on the child to give education, to give the happiness, to give the sustenance to this child. Okay. And also adoption intended to effect a permanent change in status, and such requires societal recognitions either through legal or religious sanction. So now we will move up to the history of the adoption. So I will explain a little bit about the history of the adoption. So, historically, some societies have enacted specific laws governing adoption, while the others use less formal means, notably contracts that specify inheritance, rights, and parental responsibilities without an accompanying transfer of filiation. Means that they are specified inheritance rights and parental responsibilities, but they are not being designated of a child to a particular parent. Okay, so the practice of adoption historically formed from the Code of Hammurabi. Okay, so what is Code of Hammurabi? Okay, the Code of Hammurabi is a Babylonian legal text composed. Okay, it is the longest or best organized and best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. Okay, the Code of Hammurabi contains the rights of adopters and the responsibilities of adopted individuals at length. For information, back then, ancient adoption practices put emphasis on the political and economic interests of the adopter. They are providing a legal tool that strengthen political ties between wealthy families and created male heirs to manage estates, meaning that they adopt some children or a child to only to strengthen political ties between wealthy families, and also created male heirs to manage estates. So next, we will move up to the adoption in Malaysia. So basically, they are a company or they are a management which call orphan care, which works with the Department of Social Welfare (JKM) in the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development to facilitate and expedite the adoption of children in Malaysia. So basically, they are taking care of they are taking care and handle of all kinds of the adoption in Malaysia. Okay, they facilitate adoption to save the lives of babies who are at risk and to give Malaysian children in institutions a chance to experience the joy of growing up in a family.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Tuan and Zulfa binti Tuan Muhamad. I would like to share with you about adoption in Islam. Okay, I will start with the Islamic history of adoption. It happened in the prophetic time after the marriage between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khadijah binti Khuwailid. She gave him a slave known as Zaid bin Haritha. Their relationship became very close, and Zaid attracted and accepted Islam. When Zaid's father, Harithah bin Shaharil, or as known as Bashaharil, came to bring Zaid back to his family, Rasulullah gave Zaid a choice between follow his father or stay still with Rasulullah. And he chose to stay with the Prophet ﷺ in preference to his father and his uncle. Due to that, Rasulullah ﷺ immediately responded by adopting Zaid, where legal contracts were agreed and witnessed. And it is announced to the crowds. What Rasulullah said, he ﷺ said, "Witness that Zaid becomes my son, with mutual rights of inheritance." On saying this, Zaid's father and his uncle were very satisfied, and they returned home without Zaid. Next, in the pre-Islamic period, the custom was that if one adopted a son, the people would call him by the name of the adopted father, whom he would inherit as well. For example, when Rasulullah adopted Zaid, then people will call him as Zaid bin Muhammad, till Allah revealed, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ادعوهم لآبائهم هو أقسط عند الله. Call them by the name of their fathers, it is more just in the sight of Allah. فإن لم تعلموا آباءهم فإخوانكم في الدين ومواليكم. But if you do not know their fathers, then they are still your brothers in religion, in Islam, and those who are entrusted to you. وَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ فِيمَا أَخْطَأْتُمْ بِهِ وَلَكِنْ مَا تَعَمَّدَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ. And there's no blame upon you for that in which you are erred, but only for what hearts intended. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. And ever is Allah forgiving and merciful. From Surah Al-Ahzab, the 5th ayah. Okay, after the revelation of this ayah, Zaid reverted to being known by his original name of Zaid bin Harisah and was no longer considered as Muhammad's legal son. So, it is clearly seen that raising a child who is not one's genetic child is allowed, and in the case of an orphan, even encouraged. But according to the Islamic view, the child does not become a true child of the adoptive parents. For example, the child should be named with the biological father and not with adoptive father. This doesn't mean raising a non-biological child is not allowed, but it means that the adoptive child doesn't carry the same name as his or her adoptive parent. Overall, the adoption in Islam is permissible, but bequeathing name an adopted child to adoptive father is prohibited and illegal in Islam. Okay, here I stated some of benefits of that prohibition. First, to recognize biological father and maintaining lineage ties between them. Second, to maintain the boundaries of intercourse and aurah between the adopted child and his adopted family, who are considered as non-mahram. Third, to preserve the rights of the adopted child from the side of the biological father, and also protect the inheritance right of the biological children of the adoptive father. So, with this kind of benefits, it is crystal clear that Islam protects every single rights of the ummah and want to avoid destruction from happen in the society. هذا فقط مني. Next, I will pass to my beloved group members, Awatif.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Awatif binti Zulkiflee and my matric number is 1911514. Okay, so today I'm going to explain to you regarding the special concerns in adoptions. Okay, generally in adoptions there are Islamic value which need to obey among the adopted family. It does not mean when the adopted child accept in the family, then everything are permitted and easily changed, whether in family background aspects, inheritance, marriage prohibitions, and privacy boundaries aspect. So it is not easy as you think when it comes to the adoptions. That's why Muslim scholars who argue against adoptions usually bring up a specific concerns regarding this matter. Okay, so first of all, commonly when the child becomes to the family, then we start ask a question whether the family background have changed or not. So based on the verses from the Quran stated that the pre-Islamic practice of claiming adopted children as biological children absolutely prohibited, which stated in the Surah Al-Ahzab verses 4 to 5. These verses explains to us that it is a ban on adoptions, but the Islamic Council holds that it is actually referred to harm in dissimulations or pretense, not harm in adoption, which means it is prohibited to hide the identity of the adopted child from the biological family, and it is actually against the Islamic law. Okay, overall, to protect the family background of the adopted child, which means that their connections to their biological family, it is to preserve it. It is prohibited for adopted family to hide the adopted child's family background because it could lead to the identity crisis and confusions for them. Adopted child come from the unknown family. Okay, the surname of the adoptive family has not been mentioned automatically to the child because this is part of the adoption procedure which Islam does not accept. Okay, so during pre-Islamic Arabia, it is, or we call it as before the existence of Islam, before Islam come, the adoption system actually is same with West traditions, which is the child even takes the family name of the adoptive father. Okay, so the adoptive parents must inform adopted children of the status with due considerations. The knowledge of biological lineage is very vital in protecting the child's right to inherit from his or her biological parents' estate. So for the children's background is unknown, the parents should follow the adoptions practices based on Islamic law to make the child adapt with the adopted parents' surrounding. Okay, for inheritance issue, if the child is provided with wealthy or with property from their biological family, the adoptive parents are commanded to take care and not mix that property or wealthy together with their own. Means that they cannot use it according to their desire, okay, to buy everything they want, because they just hold a responsible as a trustee for the wealthy of the adopted child. There are specific verses which emphasize that the orphans is tied to financial matters and advise us as a believers for not to rob them and take advantage from them, as stated in the verses from the Quran in Surah An-Nisa verses 2 and 10. Okay, in Islamic law compilation stated that between the adopting parents and adopted children, there is no relationship of inheritance, but as a form of recognition to the adoption institutions, their relationship is actually confirmed by wasiat wajibah, or we call it as a will, which is to differentiate it from the positions of heir. What is will? A will is one form of ownership of wealth and recognized in Islamic law. In addition, it is other forms of ownership. Okay, the practice of wills has well known actually long time ago before Islam come, but it is not practiced correctly. It did not have clear rules and not practiced clearly. At that time, everyone was free to give his assets or wealthy to anyone they wanted without the supervisions and regulations which govern them. According to Sunni fiqh, a person can leave a maximum of 1/3 of their property to anyone who is not related to them by blood. This exact part is not listed in the Quran. However, it has generally been accepted by fiqh scholars. Obviously, it is not an obstacle for the adopted child to hire the wealthy from their adopted family as well. So the law also do not prevent a person from making a gift from their assets to anyone during his or her lifetime. And there are also no prohibitions on the size of the gift unless the intention is to harm legally the adopted child. For instance, adoptive family can also choose to use alms, or we call it as zakat, and charity as a sadaqah as instruments for the transfer of wealth in favor of the adopted child. The dues of zakat in cases where adopting parents are liable to pay it could be accumulated year after year along with sadaqah that the adopting family might want to make it in a year according to the time that they want. Quran recommends all believers to maintain to up-to-date and accurate wills and also remember the rights of their parents and close relatives as stated in the Surah Al-Baqarah verses 180. This is because to ensure that their property is distributed according to their wishes and to make provisions for all their children, whether it's biological or adopted, to get fairly. Next, for marriage prohibitions. Okay, those who is prohibited to marry, it can be known as unmarriageable kin according to Islamic law. Okay, the status of unmarriageable kin can be acquired by one of three means, which consists of marriage, kinship, or milk foster relationship. Okay, for milk foster relationship, it is as having been a breastfed during the baby. Okay, when the adopted child is below 2 years of age and is also a breastfed directly by the adoptive mother and at least a day and a night. Okay, so how about the adopted child who already grown up? Okay, marriage between a child grow up through kafala and a biological children of the family is legal under Islamic law. Okay, in contrast with the Western tradition, which consider marriage between the adopted siblings and adopted parents and adopted offspring as enchanted and prohibited. So that means there is no reason to avoid adoptions due to varying marriage restrictions. Muslim scholars have historically not considered the kafala as a barrier to a marriage, as an obstacle. But there are no ruling which suggests that marriage between the biological and non-biological family members either. Okay, next, there are privacy and boundaries among the adopted family members. Okay, in the Quran already stated that the relationship between the child and biological family actually is never changed. It means that the relationship between the child and adoptive family will never become the real family among them unless the child have a milk foster relationship like I just explained just now. Okay, so it means the child actually is still considered as a non-haram, which is a marriageable person, meaning that there are certain Islamic rules that need to follow by them. In Islamic law, it is a must for the adopted family to make a segregation, okay, which is to practice in differentiates the degrees, okay, or the gender. However, there are many Muslims do not follow to this view and do not consider them as a requirement, and they think that it is not important. So the way they practice regarding privacy and boundaries definitely differ from household to household, and it is must be determined according to the dynamics within each. Secondly, it is a crucial for the family to have a social ties, which means it is the experience of growing up together in a household that will create the ties we then recognize as a biological. Okay, sharing someone's life, who is not our blood ties, makes them considered as a family. Okay, this is because there are a lot of cases of incest and child abuse across the world. Because of what? Because of ethnicity, because of the religions, okay? Or because of blood ties, and also because of the segregations, which is all of these are no guarantee will against the sexual abuse and incest. Instead of, it will lead to the psychiatric disorders, okay? And not because of a lack of willing or segregations. The Quran actually recognizes that sharing a life and intermixing are important to the establishment of family ties, as stated in the Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 220. Okay, actually, these verses has traditionally been understood to apply in cases of intermixing the orphan's property with the property of the guardian. It might be viewed in a larger sense. Okay, particularly the word used in this verse for intermixing in the Quran is tukhalithuhum. Tukhalithuhum from the word is iqtilat, which is the exact same term used by the proponents of gender segregations to refer to the intermixing of sexes. Clearly, the Quran actually suggests that orphans within the household can be treated as brothers or sisters. Segregating an adopted child upon puberty based upon his or her gender does not qualify as treating the child as a brother or sister as directed by the sacred text. And this practice may cause severe emotional and psychological damage both to the adopted child and to the other members of the household.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ilham Thurayya binti Rizlan, and I am responsible to explain on the Western perspective of adoption, which I will touch on the developments of domestic adoptions in Western Europe. I will explain on 2 points under this development, which is before child adoption law and laws allowing child adoption. So the first one is before child adoption law. So Western European adoption laws creates a parent-child relationship between a couple or individual, the adopter, and another younger person, the adoptee, so that the adoptee inherits from the adopter's surname and property and is subjected to its parental authority. The adopted child may be an orphan, a child who was legally or illegally abandoned, a child who was removed from its abusive parents, a foreign child, or kin such as stepchild who is adopted following one of its parents' widowhood or divorce and remarriage. So as a legal institution, adoption also differs from forced marriage and informal arrangement, which is found in most stateless societies of the past, and also in many present-day societies in the world, including Western Europe. From the early Middle Ages to the late 18th century, there were almost no formal adoptions. The Western European had a deep suspicion against it, including strangers into the family, especially the illegitimate child of fallen women whose bad blood could spoil the lineage heritage. When the first Western European civil codes reintroduced adoption, like in France, 1804, Saxony, and Italy, they allowed only adoption of adults. Before child adoption was allowed, Western European orphans and abandoned children were usually cared for by institutions such as orphanage and foundling hospitals. Laws allowing child adoption since 19th century should thus be seen in the context of an emerging public concern for the welfare of children, including illegitimate children who were deprived of certain inheritance right. Okay. So moving on to the second point, laws allowing child adoption. Okay, the first Western country to introduce child adoption law is US in 1851, which Massachusetts Act to provide for the adoption of children, and successive acts in other states until the 1870s. So following countries such as New Zealand, West Australia, and British Columbia followed their footsteps. The first Western Europe country to actually introduce child adoption law is Germany. In the 90s, German civil code replaced the German state's law with a harmonized civil legislation, and it's allowed simple adoption of both adults and children. Most adoptions were adult adoptions until the 1910s, but since the 1920s, most adoption involved children. Germany was also the last of the 5 Western European countries to allow full child adoption through a 1976 law which came into force in 1977. So, following Germany's footsteps is Sweden, which they introduced adult and child adoption in 1917. They allowed adoption by singles and married couples over 25 years old without legitimate children. In 1944, they allowed adoptions by parents of legitimate children. Means before they only allowed couples that don't have an offspring, but then they allowed when they when they have children of their own. Okay, next is France. They introduced child adoption through a 1923 law which was broadly similar to those in Germany and Sweden. Later, the French lawmaker also allowed adoptions by parents of legitimate children in 1917 and by adopters as young as 30 years old in 1966 and 28 years old in 1996. Following that is England and Wales. They introduced full adoption through the Adoption of Children Act in 1926, which came into force in 1927, which Northern Ireland followed in 1929 and Scotland in 1930. Finally, Italy introduced child adoption in its 1942 civil code that singles and married couples over 50 years old without legitimate children could adopt a child, but only child that is Aryan child, which is this provision was eliminated by the Royal Duchy of 20th January 1944. Italy then allowed adoptions by parents of illegitimate children and by adopters as young as 18 years old in 1967. So moving on to the last part of this. So why did Western European lawmakers allow child adoption despite the deep-seated suspicions against it? First is to care for Second World War orphans, in which legitimate children of national heroes died in war. So hence why they want to implement this law. And the second is to care for the growing numbers of war babies that was born at that time, and to eliminate as well baby farming and related child abuse happening at that particular time. Secondly is to create a secure legal bond between the child and its parents, because at that time adopters' fear was their birth parents would take back again their child from them, and thus making a commotion and scandal. Secondly is to relieve the state from a financial burden that the child was facing, and was supposed to reduce the children's risk of becoming criminals later. That's all from me, and I will pass the floor to the next presenter. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Farrah Syazwani, binti Zakaria. I will talk about the need for education or change and positive media portrayals of adoption from Western view. There are 4 points that I will explain, and the first point is societal beliefs. Second is increased media portrayals of positive adoption stories. Third is societal misperceptions about adoption. And last one is change overall child welfare system. My first point is societal beliefs, which is changing definition of family. Most all parents indicated the need for more public-wide education concerning adoption. All parents content society is becoming much more accepting of adoption. Their views are corroborated by research results from the National Adoption Attitude Survey 2002, which revealed that the proportion of Americans with very favorable opinions about adoption increased from 56% in 1997 to 63% in 2002. There are assessments that are consistent with Creedy's 2001 research results, wherein a majority of unmarried pregnant women did not make adoption plans for their children because they viewed adoption as bad. These thoughts are consistent with Daly's 1994 findings, where high school students reported they would not choose an adoption plan for their baby if they or their partner became pregnant. The most common answer for that response was the perception they would be abandoning their baby. Second is increased media portrayals of positive adoption stories. Many parents indicated that societal beliefs about adoption are related to the media's portrayal of it. Thus, most believe society's perceptions could be enhanced if the media made a concerted effort to share positive adoption stories. Furthermore, the parents' memories are consistent with Creedy's 2000 broad analysis of print, advertisement, and media stories, which revealed many negative misperceptions about birth families, adopted children, and adoptive parents. Many parents' desire for more positive media portrayals of adoption is congruent with Creedy's recommendation to implement a broad public education campaign about adoption and positive adoption language. In summary, it is a likely assumption that if positive media stories outweigh negative stories, more birth parents might choose adoption plans for their children, and more families may adopt children. Societal misperceptions about adoptions. Most of the parents know of or have experienced others' misperceptions of adoptions. One mother shared a few misperceptions she has heard, such as the fear birth parents will try to reclaim their child, it is difficult to successfully adopt children from the United States, and birth moms are taking the easy way out. Next, the preceding misperceptions are also substantiated by other research results. Creedy 2001 noted many Americans believe it is harder to love an adopted children than a biological child. This misperception is also corroborated by an Evan B. Donaldson Foundation study where 1/4 of those surveyed, though it thought it may be harder to love an adopted child as much as a child born to them. He also thought some believe adoptive parents don't treat their adopted children the same as their biologically related children. Last one is change overall child welfare system, which means biological ties need not prevail. Most all parents express the need for the U.S. legal system to change to operate in the best interest of children. These parents adamantly exclaim that biological ties to a child should not be the primary factor in deciding who should parent a child. Rather, they believe children should be placed in loving, nurturing, stable homes regardless of biological ties to an adult. Result reported by Johnson 2002 concluded an adoptive family is a remarkable environment for a child, healing from emotional and physical trauma and reversing development deficits. More importantly, Johnson reported that one group, normal infants placed within the first year of life, offers the best opportunity to explore where the loss of a birth family and growing up in an adoptive home has a negative effect on children's development. Thus, the current study offered opportunities to assess the long-term effects of adoption on children adopted before 18 months of age.